Right. So I'd like to welcome everyone to this meeting of the Cape Girardeau County Genealogical Society. And those of you that maybe don't know me, I'm Bill Edelman, giving the program tonight. I'm the Vice President of the Society. And tonight we're going to hear about the State Historical Society, Missouri. And many of you, if you've heard of the State Historical Society, Missouri, have probably heard about the newspaper collection. That's just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to doing research at the society, though. A little bit about the State Historical Society, Missouri. It was founded in 1898 by the Missouri Press Association, which partially explains why the connection with newspapers. It's always had a strong connection with preserving newspapers of Missouri. The Western Historical Manuscripts Collection is something that many of you may have heard about, particularly if you've been around research for a while. It actually no longer exists. It was absorbed by the State Historical Society some years ago, but it was founded by the University of Missouri in 1943. We're at each of the 4 University of Missouri campuses today. It didn't used to be true. And the Western Historical Manuscripts Collection was a long-time partnership with State Historical Society, but it merged in 2010. The mission of the State Historical Society is to collect, preserve, publish, exhibit, and make available material on all aspects of Missouri history, and also generate interest in the rich cultural heritage of Missouri and its people, which partially explains why we have a really good art collection as well. Now, a lot of people get goofed up because we have the Missouri State Archives. First of all, Missouri State Archives is not all, but primarily public records. They do have collections of manuscripts and other materials that relate to Missouri. So it's well worth going there, not only for the state records, but for the other potential manuscript collections you might find. But the one we really get confused with is the Missouri Historical Society. Those are 2 different entities. The State Historical Society and the Missouri Historical Society are different. Missouri Historical Society dates back to 1868, and it's in St. Louis, and it is very strong in holdings from St. Louis. But because for 30 years it was the only statewide historical society, they have a lot of other early materials that were at least saved. So if you talk about Cape Girardeau County, they have a lot of our early tax lists. They are in St. Louis. If you've ever been to their research center, it's in an old synagogue on Skinker. Beautiful building. You'll spend the first 15 minutes just staring at the dome when you're there, but it's not the State Historical Society. There is a link for a virtual tour, and probably what I'll do is send a handout with a bunch of links to post on the website along with this. And one of the links is the virtual tour, but all of these links are on the State Historical Society website, which is shsmo.org. We operate through 6 research centers around the state. Didn't used to be true. It used to be true that it was just in Columbia. The newest one is Cape Girardeau by a little bit of time. The Springfield is almost as new. Columbia is the original one, and it is now, the building is called the Center for Missouri Studies. It's a relatively new building, just a few years old. It's on 6th and Elm Streets. I'll point out that the meeting of the State Genealogical Association this year, the 5th and 6th of August, will be at the Center for Missouri Studies. So if you're thinking about going there, would be a good time to do it, because we'll have training sessions on using the collections and on using the newspaper collection that go beyond what I'm going to talk about tonight. Kansas City has a brand new facility on campus. Rolla is within the library on the Missouri S&T campus. Springfield is also within their campus library for Missouri State. And in St. Louis at UMSL, the St. Louis Center is in the Thomas Jefferson Library, along with the Mercantile Library. These centers tend to try to collect in their part of the state. We have different parts of the state that are designated as collecting areas, although we will take things from outside the collecting area in the different research centers. So Columbia is the big one, and it's the oldest one, and it has quite a bit in terms of manuscript collections. If you research Cape County, some of them are going to be in Columbia, some of them are going to be in Rolla because of the old Western Historical Manuscripts collection. Kansas City's collecting area is west central and northwestern Missouri. St. Louis Research Center is primarily centered in St. Louis, but some of the surrounding counties as well, down to Jefferson. Rolla is the central Ozarks down to the southern border of the state. Springfield is the southwest. And then, of course, Cape Girardeau. Many people oftentimes say you're hard to find. The reason we're hard to find is we don't decide where the signs go. The university decides where the signs go. We are right now the only entity that's on that sign out in front of the building, except you can't see it when you're driving by because it's facing the wrong direction. Now, when we have events, we put one so that you can read it from the road temporarily. But we're in Pacific Hall, which is where North Street tees against Pacific, North Pacific. We are on the lower level. It's on the lower right of the photograph here. And there are parking spaces right outside the door designated for us. Well, what do? We do a lot. First of all, is we have publications. We have the quarterly scholarly journal, the Missouri Historical Review, which focuses on aspects of Missouri history, dates back to 1906, and includes book reviews. And a lot of people may see that and think, well, okay, that doesn't have anything to do with my genealogy. What this has to do with your genealogy is you read articles in the Missouri Historical Review because they provide background information for your ancestors. So this one appeared relatively recently. If you know anything about Germans in Missouri, you would recognize the author. He has translated letters during the Civil War, along with some researchers in Germany, that were written from here back to Germany, from Civil War soldiers or people that lived at that time. He's written on the Germans in Missouri. He has a book out that's just on Germans in Missouri. And this article is on Missouri Germans, the cause of union and freedom. If you had a German ancestor in the Union Army, you might want to look at this article. It might provide some interesting information about why they did what they did, why they thought the way they did, and why they tended more so to join the Union Army. Then we have twice annually, I think it's about ready to go back to 3 times. COVID, we dropped back to twice annually, magazine called the Missouri Times. Has more newsy items and updates on the different collections and aspects of the society. It's free to members. If you came by our research center, you could probably pick up a copy when it comes out, even if you're not a member. And then they're posted online pretty quickly now after they're released. So here's the sort of things you'd get in the Times. The State Historical Society of Missouri also publishes books, and here's just 3 examples. Some of them are reprints of collections of articles from the review that have a common theme. So this one was on fighting the Civil War in Missouri. And then there are books that are just about one single topic, the one on Thomas Hart Benton, and then Longer Than a Man's Lifetime in Missouri is a German-oriented memoir. We have Historic Missourians. It used to be biographies for Missouri students. These are biographies of famous Missourians, some of which aren't so famous. Does anyone know who John Hardiman Walker was? Why is he famous? Have you ever heard of the Missouri Boot Heel? Why is there a Missouri Boot Heel? Because this guy pulled strings. He knew people. He had property in Caruthersville. He wanted it to be part of Missouri. And so, lo and behold, it became part of Missouri when they drew the boundaries. He was a county official in Pemiscot County, New Madrid County before then for many, many years. We have the Missouri Encyclopedia, which is a work in progress. It's topics related to Missouri history. They recruit writers to prepare these. And then we were the lead entity for the Missouri Bicentennial. We recently kind of closed out what we do in Cape by having the Bicentennial quilt on display. It's now in Rolla. It's doing its farewell tour. But there's a few things still going on. A book just was issued on the Bicentennial celebration and commemoration. So there's still a few things, but it's pretty much, that was last year. We're the lead entity for National History Day in Missouri. And we have an annual meeting with a fall lecture and also the My Missouri lecture series, which is done usually with, there are certain topics that they tie these lecture series into. One is the African American experience in Missouri. Then we have a podcast series, which has a whole variety of different topics. The very first one of these that was done was basic genealogy, because I'm the one that recorded it at Columbia. They asked me to be the first one. And we're up way beyond 39 by now. I think it's up in the 70s. They're still all available on the website. And then there's other programs. We really exploded in our offerings of other streaming programs during the pandemic, including the 12-part basic genealogy that I just finished recently. But there's other series too. There's one that I think is going on tomorrow night, which is pretty much the same topic I'm talking about tonight, only it's done by the center director over in Rolla. We have a really good collection of Missouri artists. That was one of the nice things about moving out of Ellis Library into the Center for Missouri Studies. We can now exhibit 1% of the art collection at a time instead of only 0.5% or less. So we're real strong on artists like George Caleb Bingham. Most of what you see in this picture. Thomas Hart Benton. Editorial cartoonists for Missouri newspapers like Englehart. Fitzpatrick, I barely remember the last few of his appearing when I was a little kid. This one was from World War I. Okay, that's all the rest of the stuff we do. What about research? That's what most of you really wanted to hear about tonight. Well, I'm going to tell you right up front, I'm going to give you, if all else fails, normally that's the last thing you talk about. I talk about the all else fails. I'm going to talk about it first. This is, if all else fails, there's a nuclear option for searching our website to try to find your ancestor, and that is the search bar on the first page, the shsmo.org. You can write anything in there and it will search for either all the words, or you can put parentheses around it and it looks for text strings. And I'm going to carry a guy through on several things. His name was Charles Henricks, German immigrant, came to Texas very quickly, came up to Cape Girardeau after he brought the rest of his family over. He was a son and he brought his parents and siblings over after he made a little money. He became a pretty successful businessman in Cape. He enlisted in the Civil War in, I think, in Missouri Cavalry and one of the regiments. And after the war, went down and bought a business southwest of Cape Girardeau in a place that they started to call Henricksville. We call it Dutchtown, and it recently disincorporated. In fact, I think city limits sign used to be up on the wall there. Uh, but he didn't stay there long, and so they named it Dutchtown when they incorporated. And he went down to Poplar Bluff and again was successful in business and started a colony for German immigrants, which failed at a place called Corolla down Black River. So I'm going to search for him, and I'm going to use him as an example throughout. So if I just search for Hendricks, the top hit I get is a manuscript collection, which is actually on microfilm, because Hendricks' son, Lincoln, allowed the State Historical Society in microfilm his father's papers, and we don't know where the originals are today. Hendricks Lincoln would be probably 130 if he were still alive. I met him when he was around 90 back in the 70s. So we have his papers at least on microfilm. And then there's a variety of other hits, German Americans, and it pretty much all these hits involve the fact that we have his papers. So I'll come back to Charles Hendricks when we look for some other things, but research, if you need a good library for Missouri resources, we've got it. We probably have the best one for genealogists. Midwest Genealogy Center is pretty darn good, but for Missouri, we probably have a better collection. Any local history you'd be interested in, any record abstract books is likely to be in our library. You can look online to see what's in our library by using a reference collection link. And what we do is we tie into Merlin, which is a statewide University of Missouri online catalog system. And it includes our holdings as well as the universities in the state. Also, if you get on the reference part of the website, you'll find a link to research guides, which most people ignore, but they ignore that at their peril. Because if you're looking for topics, these research guides are really good. So when you search for something on Merlin, you do a keyword or a journal title, an author's name, title begins with, and it'll tell you the repository when it pops up. And if we've got it, it'll say State Historical Society. And then it's just like any card catalog from there. If you click on different links, you can find out where they are, how to find them, the call number, and so forth. Now, I probably should warn you, this actually is dead right now. It's being reconfigured, and it's going to take like over a year to reconfigure everything. So throw yourself on the mercy of one of our librarians if you're looking to find something. This is something else that's handy that people ignore, but it's really handy if you're looking for counties. It's the call number for individual counties in Missouri. This will work anywhere that uses, I guess, Dewey Decimal System. We also have a genealogy surname index, which is well known for many years, but people don't use it anymore because they don't know how to use card catalogs. We do. This is going to be eventually digitized and put online, but it's pretty far down the priority scale. But if you look for an ancestor, you might just get a hit and you'll find out where they're mentioned. In this case, Sarah White, who was Sarah Williams, is in the history of Lewis, Clark, Knox, and Scotland counties in 1887. That sounds like a Goodspeeds or something like it. We have county indices of various sorts, the typical cemetery, marriage, probate, and so forth, and newspaper indices or abstracts. Family surname histories that are Missouri connected. We don't, if people want to donate out-of-state genealogies, we're less likely to take those. County and town histories, anything that gets issued that's a county and town history, we try to acquire for the library. City directories, and that's mostly in Columbia, though. If you come to our research center, we just have a subset of what's available that's duplicates. And I'm constantly getting my hands on more duplicate stuff. The only thing is we've only got room for about one more 5-foot shelf, and we're out. You're also going to find yearbooks, catalogs, courses of study, things that are related to education and schools. Government publications like the Blue Books, the agency annual reports, the laws, and the Senate and House journals. Gee, I don't want to look at those, they're boring. Yeah, okay, that explains those records that you're looking up all the time and why they change over time. It's one of the biggest revelations I've had is learning, wow, that's why this happened, because it's in the law. And you got to look at the law to figure that out. Maps, all sorts of maps. We have hard copies of maps. We have some digitized, a subset of what we've got. So state, county, city, and town maps, plat maps, and atlases. The only thing is you can't reliably count on one being available for the area you're interested in, the time you're interested in. Cape County is horrible. The first thing I know about, there's some county maps, but they don't show land ownership until that 1901, which is not available as a book. It's just a big sheet. And really the first comprehensive plat book is not till 1930. So if you want to make copies of any of this, there's several ways to do it. If you're at the Center for Missouri Studies, we have copy machines, which is so 20th century. I just did a circuit court case today that I was interested in. We have Scan Pro machines, 25 cents a printed copy as well, which, by the way, we have these at our research center in Cape as well. We allow you to use phone cameras or other cameras, but no scanners, because that gets to be a kind of a hassle. You take up too much table space. We accept cash or credit debit card. We also have a lot of digital collections, which I'll talk about one at a time. These are usually a small subset of what we've got. Many of they are available as originals or microfilm only, not digital. This includes photographs, maps, plat maps. Oral histories are digital and on the website oftentimes. Manuscripts. One thing I always point out to people, if you're trying to find, well, where is that? I've never heard of that in this county. It might be in the Ramsey Place Names file. This was based on a thesis that was done in the 1930s where somebody researched local place names and tried to figure out why they got that name. And other things have been added over time. And of course, newspapers, many of them are digitized. The photograph collection is searchable by keywords, photographer, creation date, format, collection name, or creation locality. And we tend to digitize things if they're interesting. So if it's an interesting person, if it's an interesting suit of clothing or outfit. Recently we got, if you remember Carol Brule, who used to be in the society, passed away some years ago. She had a lot of photographs, and of course, I don't think they had any kids, but they didn't want them. And in that collection of photographs is a bunch of traditional Alsatian clothing outfits with people wearing them, of course. We scanned some of those, put them on Facebook, and somebody saw that and they were researching that. So you never know what's going to hit. So when you get to photograph collection link, And I'm going to search for something that I know is a great collection that we digitized most of it because it was such a good collection. If any of you remember the co-op on Main Street in Cape, was run by Mary Jane Barnett, and I think her name was Miss Tommy. Mary Jane took a lot of photos and they had that store for 60 years. And so here's just some examples. Tea set on sideboard, riverfront of Cape Girardeau in about 1975. A lot of these were either dated or we could date them pretty handily. The original mural on the seawall in 1967. So lots of things like that are available. Maps, which are usually state maps, but we also have some county plat maps. Again, here's one that just Missouri in 1816 to 19. I'm almost certain this map was made much later than that, but it's showing county boundaries real early. And it even shows Lawrence County, Missouri, which is not the same Lawrence County we have today. Lawrence County, Missouri in this time frame became Lawrence County, Arkansas. Included a big chunk of lower part of Missouri though. And then plat maps. We link them by county. Like I said, Cape Girardeau County is terrible. But if you get a real good county, you never know what you're going to find. This is an early one. I believe this is from the 1870s. And it shows all the landowners at that time. And I think it was Adair County. Oral histories. We're getting a lot more of these because for some years now, we have employed an oral historian. If anybody has any great ideas for an older person that would be good to interview for this, let me know because I'll get Sean down here. He recorded Dr. Dan Kottner. At my suggestion, he recorded Dave Neiswanger, of course, who passed away this year. So I'm glad I was able to record him. And I made other suggestions. Fortunately, I wish Kenny Hawes would agree to talk to him, but he wouldn't do it. He's 100 years old and a World War II veteran. Uncle of a friend of mine. But the big thing we've got, other than newspapers, our second largest collection of papers, manuscripts collections. We have a searchable database at collections, shsmo.org, manuscripts. And these have inventories, which include the description and contents. It's a finding aid. And whether it's on site, in other words, if I make arrangements, an appointment, I can just go look at it. Or if it's at the Records Center, some of the larger collections are stored away from the Center for Missouri Studies and we need a few days notice to get them moved. So you need to check that if you ever intend to do research. So what do we have in manuscripts? Sometimes family history information collections. Couple of the good ones we've got in Cape, and we've got Dorothy Fulbright Shaper's collection. If anyone knew Burns Shaper, that Dorothy was his wife, and she worked on the Fulbrights. We've got Betty Sewell, who worked a lot on the Kennedys and related families down in Mississippi County. And then we've got some of Lorena Akers' things that she collected. Those are scattered all over the place, though. There's some in Columbia, there's some in North Carolina. We've got some. She collected a lot of stuff. We have business records, which a lot of people, if they're doing genealogy, think, so what? Well, that includes ledgers, and your ancestor bought from businesses and might be in those ledgers. And they document people being places where you maybe didn't think they were. So they're useful. And then really useful are diaries and journals. So you can either go from the first page and do the Hail Mary go for broke option to try to find manuscript collections, or you can do it intelligently. You can browse by the research center. In other words, I want to go to Cape. What do they have in Cape at that research center? Because I'm just doing this on kind of a 2-day notice. I don't have time to move them. So I'll just see what they got there. Or you can look for different topics, or you can look for counties. And I can guarantee you when you hit Cape Girardeau County, there's going to be things that relate that are in Rolla, Columbia, St. Louis probably, and Cape. Okay, let's go back to Charles Henrich. We found his papers before. Well, if you click on his papers, that link, you'll notice, first of all, it has a real brief summary of what's in there. And it was the 10th Volunteer Missouri Cavalry, Company L. 2 rolls of microfilm, what you're going to find. And then there's this link to a finding aid. And we're going to click on that. And it has all this detail. We have really, for the most part, pretty good finding aids, particularly if it's newer collections that were acquired more recently. And we're going back and revising finding aids as time goes on to improve them. So if you look at this, first of all, there's an introduction that just tells what's in the collection and a little bit about maybe what's in it and the person that generated it. Then we have information about how we got it, donor information. Then if it involves a person, if it's their personal papers, or if it's a business, we have a sketch about that business or a sketch about that person. And then there's a description of what's in each container. In this case, it's 2 microfilm rolls. So what's on each microfilm roll? So the first one is primarily Civil War related. The second one, some Civil War related material, but also other things like Corolla, the failed German colony in the Boot Heel. And then index terms, which a lot of times are lists of people that are mentioned in those, in that collection. Very important, if you're going to request a collection be moved from one research center to the other, which is a service we offer. If you find something in Columbia and you don't want to drive to Columbia, but you can drive to Cape, we can move the collection a lot of the time. You're going to need that number, the collection number. In this case, the information conveyed there, C is Columbia, CG is Cape Girardeau, S is St. Louis, SP is Springfield, R is Rolla, K is Kansas City. Each collection will have one of those codes, then a number. And then you'll also notice the folder list. It'll show folder numbers and what materials in those. Some other online resources, which are under digital, Missouri place names, that's the Ramsey files I mentioned, which is kind of handy if you're researching a given area, a given county. And that is actually a collection, which you can click on the finding aid for. And then when you do that, you can search by county. And we're going to do DeKalb County. And it's got an alphabetized list of place names, description of what those are, where they are, and the source for the information. I love that it's sourced. And so much of what we deal with in genealogy is unsourced. So Amity, laid out in 1870, that's the second one there. And it means goodwill or friendship in Latin. A lot of these things will be extinct towns. So if your ancestor lived in one of those, it might be handy to find out where it is. Some other digital collections we have: African American Experience, American Civil War, Frontier and Pioneer Life. These are compilations of photographs, manuscript collections, and so forth. Maps, maybe. that relate to these topic areas. Greater Kansas City Jewish Community Archives is a very big collection in Kansas City. World War I and World War II letters. And I'm always telling people, you know, if you've got World War I and II letters, and I get tired of hearing this, oh, my dad was just a regular guy. He didn't do anything spectacular. He didn't win any medals. So what? You're not going to be interested in his letters. Yes, we are. We're interested in just the regular folks too. And of course, the newspaper collection. We have the largest collection of Missouri newspapers. If you go to Chronicling America, which is the free Library of Congress site for digital newspapers, a lot of the Missouri ones that are on there, we digitized. State Archives digitizes newspapers, but they have this awful platform. And they'll even admit that it's awful because you can only look at one page at a time. It's poorly searchable. And unfortunately, the Cape Girardeau Weekly Argus is on that platform. And someday look for us, the archives and the State Historical Society, to talk about bringing their newspapers in and making them better for searching and more in line with standards. So starting in 1808, the earliest Missouri newspaper, the Gazette, we have 56 million pages, more than that actually by far now, on microfilm. We're still subscribing to 300 current papers that are still adding issues. The originals are not accessible except in very rare cases. Rather, we microfilm what we've got, and you can look at the microfilm. You can request any newspaper microfilm be sent to any of the research centers. You have to allow time for that to happen. And then some are digitized more all the time, but believe me, they don't do the ones I want done first either. I'd rather have everything before 1870 done first and then go forward. But we've got old newspapers that aren't digitized, and then we've got some that are brand new that are digitized. I think it has to do with the size of the city. We also have, again, an underutilized resource to selected Missouri newspapers, 1808 to 1929. It's only an index, it's underutilized, and you can request scanned articles for a small fee. Look for that under Index to Selected Missouri Newspapers. And again, all these links will be in the handout I'll ask to be posted on the website. Well, first of all, the newspapers on microfilm, which is pretty much everything we got is on microfilm. It's just a subset that's been digitized. You can browse newspaper titles by county. You can browse by town. We have an online catalog you can use. When you get to the newspaper you're interested in, and this one is published in a town called Albany in Gentry County. It's the Albany capital. And it will list the dates we have. And you'll notice something here. There's a number that's circled. That is the microfilm reel number that you'll want to request if you wanted to look at those newspapers. There are two reasons for breaks in the dates like this. One is we ran out of space on a microfilm and had to start on another film. The other is there's a gap in our holdings. Pay attention to the dates. In this case, there's no gap in the dates. It's just that we continue on to the next film. The digital newspaper project, and a lot of people think, well, I can't access that. I don't have a newspapers.com subscription. If you get to our website, and we have digitized it, under the ones that we've digitized under these LSTA, Library Services and Technology grants, are available through our website for free. And that's a lot of them. It includes materials 3 years after they first appeared in Ancestry outside LSTA grants. So if they were digitized by Ancestry and appeared 3 years ago or more, they're also available. Again, you can access them at the research centers no matter what, if we have them digitized or if anybody's digitized them. But after 3 years, you can access them from home for free. Every year we get a new grant, and it usually covers 8, 10 counties, certain newspapers. I wish I had input into which ones are digitized, but I don't. They decide that in Columbia. So access instructions. The link is this collections, newspapers, MDNP, and again, that'll be on the handout. You have to use this link to access them every single time you get in. So if you shut your computer down, go to bed, get up the next morning, you're going to have to go through this link as well. So you may want to bookmark that link when you get to it the first time. Do not bookmark a newspaper title, because then it will bounce back to, sorry, you don't have a subscription. You can access it still through this link, but just don't try to bookmark newspapers. You can browse a list of titles and click on the title to access that newspaper. When you're using this, there is an SHSMO, the blue background, dark blue background, white lettering. That logo should be visible all the time, or else you're not on the free part. If you look and it's missing, back up and start again. And you use the search box under the title or browse by date under the SHSMO logo. There is a help button. I will tell you, it's not very helpful. It never does what I'm asking about. So I want to find some stuff out about Charles Henricks again. So I click on View Digital Newspapers. And I found his death certificate, but I want to know more about him. So I want to find his obituary. And he actually died in 1910. He's one of the earliest death certificates for Butler County. And I look at the Poplar Bluff newspapers, and it looks to me like there's only one option for 1910, which is the Weekly Citizen Democrat. So I'm going to click on that one. Everything else either stopped too soon or started too late. So there I got the Weekly Citizen Democrat. When I click on that, I got my logo up top, so I'm free. And so I'll type in Henricks. And I can do browse date, but it kind of got off my screen here. And I get a whole bunch of hits for Henricks because they were big wheels in Poplar Bluff at the time of 1910 and around then. And there was a Paul Henricks and there was Link Henricks. Link was an interesting guy. He traveled all over the world when he was in his 20s and 30s, and then ended up just coming back home to Poplar Bluff and living his life out. But I eventually get there, and in 1910, there's his obit. Yay. So what do we want to do when we find something like this? We want to save it, right? To save it, I click on either clip or I guess I click on either print or clip or share. I have to start an account to do that. It's a free account. So you give them your email and you develop a password and remember those for the next time you want to clip something. And it's not going to cost you anything. It's just a way of bean counting. So I clipped out Henricks', and if you pay attention to my radio show, I actually did this research for one of my radio spots on KRCU about Corolla. I did one on the Corolla because I never knew there were any of those utopian type communities in the Boot Heel. I mean, when I look at the Boot Heel, utopia does not come to mind. But I think it was his idea to make things easier for German immigrants because maybe he, understood their plight being a German immigrant. And so he wanted to make things easier for them. But putting that in the boot heel was a really bad idea. Insects, malaria, they had to clear land and it wasn't easy. It flooded. So it didn't last very long, but it's still on the maps. There's a Corolla cemetery. Still, I guess it was actively used, maybe still is. Well, you want to prepare if you're going to visit, and I would, if you want to come up for the State Genealogical Association meeting, it's going to be there, and you can come up early and do research, and you can, stay another couple days after the meeting if you want to, although it backs up against a Sunday. But you want to prepare. You can do a lot online, and I've told you what you can do online, and you'll get some links when the handout's posted, which should be, I hope, by early tomorrow. So what can you do ahead of time? You can figure out which newspapers you want to search. If they're microfilm only, you're going to have to figure out which ones and which reels you're interested in. You can find books and maps that might be of interest. It will still work for just our card catalog. You just can't go into Merlin and go to the other campuses. You want to find manuscript collections that you may want to have pulled, especially if they're off-site. The big thing is make an appointment and talk to somebody after you make that appointment and ask questions. Do I need to have this pulled? How much advance notice do you need? That sort of thing. We do ask that you make your appointment at least 2 days before you do research. At our research center, it's not like they're breaking the doors down. If you just show up, we can probably accommodate you. We're open from 9 to 2:30, but we're there from 8 to 4:30. And we're closed Mondays, but we're there Mondays. So if you come when we're closed or on a Monday, you might want to call in advance because sometimes, like if we have to go out to Bullinger County to get some stuff, it's going to be on a Monday because we're not open. Right. You can submit a research request as well. Have some of the staff maybe start to look for you. And again, our hours have changed. They're now 9 to 2:30. Check the research center you're interested in because sometimes we keep different hours. We won't allow you to bring anything in. There's lockers that have the, stick the quarter in, turn the key, keep the key, get your quarter back and your stuff back. Pencils only and paper. And then every time you visit, you need to sign in. We have a sign in right inside the door. Center for Missouri Studies has one at the visitor information desk. The research request form is pretty easy to fill out. It can be submitted online. And we still require appointments, so you need to fill one out. It's absolutely necessary if you need a few copies or pages copied by staff. You can also request courier service with the research request form. Courier services, it's in Columbia and I want it to be in Cape. And you have to allow at least a week. We'll tell you how long probably. And so with that gives you a little bit of the basics of what you can do on our website. You can do a lot more if you go to one of the research centers in person. With that, I will entertain questions either from the live audience or those joining us on Zoom. Yes. So he has it. Skip Henricks, who was Lincoln Henricks' great grandnephew, apparently has been posting documents that indicate that he's got the original. So, and we got the microfilm. So he wrote a column for a newspaper, Link Henricks did, for the Ozark Graphic back in the 70s. And it's a really interesting column, I thought, because the guy knew the whole area backward and forward. No other questions?
Bill, I just want to say thank you very much for doing this tonight. It's great to be able to join long distance and be a part of this. Thank you so much.
No, certainly. Actually, our next meeting, I believe, is only by Zoom. We voted to do July, January, November, and January by Zoom only because either it's chance of winter weather or homecomers interfering with the normal date. So I'm sure we'll still do the fourth Tuesday in July if we're just doing Zoom. Okay, I guess if you have any other questions about anything else, those of you that joined by Zoom.
I appreciate your program